Hello and welcome to ÀṣọEl-emet Academy. I am so glad you are here for lesson 3 of module 1, beginner sewing course. In our previous lesson, we learned about the difference between industrial and domestic sewing machine and how to choose the one that best suits your sewing goals. Today, we are going to be taking a detailed tour of an industrial sewing machine. We'll be taking a detailed tour of an industrial sewing machine. And like I said in the earlier courses, the other videos, that I have the Emel 8500 industrial stress stitch sewing machine. That's what I'm going to be using. If your only industrial machine is different, fine and good, don't worry, they just vary in appearance. They are basically the same thing, especially for industrial straight stitch. And if you are using a domestic machine, you want to stay tuned to the end of this video, as I'll be dropping a PhD background of the manual machine, so that you can also understand and connect your machine with what we are doing today, right? So by the end of today's lesson, you'll be able to identify the major parts of your sewing machine, understand what each of them does, and be more confident when following future lessons. Now, we won't be sewing in these lessons, just to learn the names and functions of each machine part, right? But then before we start, please make sure your sewing machine is switched off. I had to do this video when there was no light too, so that I know that my machine is completely switched off. And I can tell you that learning this or parts of your machine is not really a waste of time, because if you learn these parts now, it will make threading, sewing, and then troubleshooting much easier for you later in the course, right? So let's get started. Before we focus on individual parts, let's look at the machine as a whole. An industrial sewing machine is made up of many parts that work together as one system. Think of it like our body. Your eyes, hands, hearts, and lungs all have different jobs, but they work together to keep the body functioning. Is that not it? It's the same thing with the sewing machine. Every part of it has a specific purpose. So if one part is not working properly or is not being used correctly, the quality of your stitching or your sewing can be affected. That's why understanding your machine is one of the most important foundations of becoming a confident tailor or sewist. So now let's begin at the very top of the machine. You see this part here? This part is called the spool spin. The spool spin is where you place your spool of thread, where you place your thread before threading the machine. And what it does is very simple. What the spool spin does is just to hold the thread securely while allowing you to sew smoothly, right? So if you don't put the spool spin very well, or the thread is hooking on something, it can cause thread breakage or even make your stitches not to be even, right? So before you start any sewing project, always check that the thread can unwind freely from this spool. Make sure that your thread is going smoothly, nothing is hindering it or stopping it from the spool, because this small habit or small thing can prevent many sewing problems. From the spool spin, the thread passes through the first thread guide. You see this thing here? It passes through it. A thread guide keeps the thread traveling along the correct path. I know it looking like it's small, like it doesn't really have like a big thing because it's small, but you'll be amazed that the smallest parts of your machine are actually what makes your stitch very smooth, right? Because you see this thing here, this tool here, that's this thread guide. It keeps your thread traveling along the correct path, and also it makes the thread not to get tangled. It makes your stitches come out very good, and also prevent thread breakage, frequent thread breakage, right? So always follow the correct threading path. Always follow the correct threading path. In lesson 5, we'll learn the complete threading process step by step. Never guess where your thread should go. Always follow the complete threading path. Now let's continue. After passing through the thread guide, the thread reaches another important area called the pretension guide. The pretension guide helps keep the thread under control before it reaches the main tension disc. Think of the pretension guide as preparing the thread, yes, as preparing the thread for the next stage of its journey. Although it's a small part, it contributes to smooth and now even the next part is called the main tension disc, or you call it the tension disc. Now, the tension disc, what does it do? It controls how tightly the upper thread is held while the machine is sewing, right? Now, imagine if you are holding two fingers, pressing on a spring. I don't know how to, pressing on a spring, if you squeeze it too tightly, right? If you squeeze it too tight, you see that the string becomes difficult to pull. Do you get? But and if you barely touch it, the string slips through easily, right? The same way the tension discs work. I am looking at what I can use to like equate that string. I think it's more like a rubber. When you stretch your rubber, you stretch it, what happens? And then when you leave it, what happens? Exactly. So the tension disc is more like that, applying just the right amount of pressure to the thread so that each stitch forms correctly. Right? And then one of the common mistake we make as beginners is that we begin to change the tension. Immediately we see a stitching problem. In reality, majority of those things might be incorrect threading, an improperly inserted needle, or maybe a bobbin that has not been wounded, correctly. If you see any bracket open, agba, tailor, bracket closed, we try as much as possible not to even touch our tension. That tension, the disc, so the knob, we try as much as possible not to reach there. First things, we check our needle, we check our, that tension place is something that most tailors, majority of us just avoid. We don't even want the trouble because the hours you can stay on it. If it is that your machine, the problem is from that point. So as a beginner, don't just adjust the tension unless you understand why you are doing it and how to do it. Now, attached to this disc is the tension knob, right? The tension adjustment knob. The tension knob, changes how much pressure the tension disc applies to the thread. Turning it in one direction, you increase it. In the opposite direction, you decrease it, right? So, like I said before, those of us that like bracket open agba tailor, bracket closed, we try as much as possible to just leave it. In fact, we maintain the factory setting of of both the tension disc and the tension knob, right? Because we know that any small slight change in it can cause a well-threaded machine to start producing uneven stitches, right? So as a beginner, just leave it the way it is. Like I said earlier, unless you know why you are turning it, where you are turning it to, and how to do that, right? Now, if you look right beside the tension knob or the tension disc, you see what we call the check spring. It's very small, you might not even notice it, right? But it performs an important job. The check spring helps maintain smooth thread movement while the machine is sewing. It prevents the upper thread from becoming slack as the needle begins forming a stitch. If this spring is damaged or incorrectly threaded, ojú ẹ̀ máa bó. Like, ojú ẹ̀ máa bó because your stitching, in fact, it will it will not be correct. And so that's why I said that as a beginner, you see this tension place. It's not to scare you or anything, but just leave it until you understand how it works perfectly and thoroughly, right? Now we move on to the take-up lever. Now, the take-up lever is one of the busiest parts of the sewing machine. See how I slowly turn the hand of my machine wheel. Notice how the take-up lever moves up and down with every turn. Every stitch your machine makes depends on this movement, right? Because after the needle carries the upper thread through the fabric, now the take-up lever, which is this, pulls the thread upward again, tightening the stitch. Now, without the take-up lever, your stitches will remain loose and untidy. So whenever you thread your sewing machine, always make sure that the thread passes through the eye of the take-up lever correctly. Because if you miss this take-up lever, you are going to have a whole lot of tangled thread underneath the fabric you're sewing. Now we move on to what we call the faceplate, right? The faceplate is housing several important moving parts. And most of the time as a tailor, you don't really need to remove this faceplate because it is always a technician, someone who is really good that has or that should open it. Unless if you feel or think maybe you are a technician and then you want to make your machine go really, you should go home and you can open it. But if you know that but you still want your machine to be functioning, then you want to leave the faceplate alone. The only thing is that you just know where it is and understand that it is housing or protecting important components inside your machine. Then we have the needle bar. The needle bar holds the sewing machine needle firmly in place, right? While your machine is going up and down, the needle bar holds it in place. Every time you press your foot pedal, that's the foot pedal, the needle bar carries the needle through the fabric, right? So if the needle bar becomes damaged or goes out of alignment, the machine may begin skipping stitches or breaking needles. You can adjust the needle bar, right? But it is always advisable that you leave it for an experienced technician. Do you get? Your own as a beginner is just to know where it is or what it is, right? Because if you look at it very well, you see that it's inside the faceplate. So just knowing where it is a good start for so we've explored you. Most of the upper part of the machine, right? Now we are going to be looking at let me call it the working area of the machine. The first off is the needle clamp. The needle clamp holds the sewing needle machine firmly in place. Without it, the needle will not remain secure while the machine is sewing. Now, I feel somebody is thinking, but you just said something about needle bar. The needle bar is the one holding the needle clamp, right? The needle clamp is inside the needle bar, right? So the needle clamp now is what is holding your needle, right? You see this screw here, yeah, you just lose it enough to remove the old needle and insert a new one in case or whenever you want to replace your needle. Now, once the new needle is fully inserted, you tighten the screw firmly back, right? But you want to be careful so you don't over tighten it so that you don't damage the screw, right? At the same time too, don't leave it too loose so that the needle does not shift while sewing or even fall out. And then we have the needle itself, right? The needle itself, think of the needle as a messenger. The job of a needle is to carry the upper thread through the fabric, right? Every stitch begins with the needle, be it hand needle, sewing machine needle. Without the needle, your machine cannot sew. And industrial sewing machine needles comes in different sizes. Different fabrics require different needle size. But I think that for most of us tailors, we prefer using the standard needle size, which is size 16. Size 16 can basically sew you anything. And then for me, I always love using size 18. That one can sew you absolutely any kind of fabric, except if it's now something that is much more thicker and requires a larger needle. But yeah, using size 16 or 18, it can really sew any of your fabrics. Now, before every sewing project, always inspect your needle. Make sure that if it is bent, you replace it. If it is blunt, you replace it. If it has hit a pin, which of course it will hit a pin and it's damaged, you replace it, because many sewing problems disappear simply by installing a new needle. And that was why I said that for basically bracket open agba tailors, bracket close, we try as much as possible to stay away from all of these things I'm explaining, like the tension discs, the tension knob. We try as much as possible to focus on the needle and then maybe the bobbin and all of that. Do you get? Most times we see that these are always the issues, right? So as a beginner, you just want to know. And then we move on to the needle position. For an industrial machine, your needle must be inserted correctly. You want to push the needle forward into the needle clamp until it can go no further, and then tighten it, right? You want to tighten it. If you don't tighten it, it will lead to uneven stitches. We're looking at the presser foot, and we'll be starting with the presser foot holder. This metal part here is called the presser foot holder. Now, what does it do? It just securely holds the presser foot, just as the name is, right? Different sewing drills sometimes require different presser feet, right? This holder allows those feet to be attached safely. You can remove it. You can just unwind like a small knob, metal knob here. Your presser foot, will come out. But this holder is the one that keeps it in place. And then we have a presser foot. This is a presser foot. It is small, but it performs one of the most important jobs on the machine. And the purpose is to hold the fabric, your cloth, firmly against the feed dogs while sewing. Somebody saying, what's feed dogs? Feed dogs are those teeth. You see those teeth there? So while sewing, the presser foot helps you hold your feet back against it. It's like, when you're what can I use now? When you're trying to write on a piece of paper while somebody is when you're trying to write on a piece of paper and somebody is trying to move that piece of paper, you know that your handwriting will not be fine. You want to write on the paper, somebody is trying to move it, the writing will not be fine, right? So that's what the presser foot does. It prevents the fabric, from being ugly, from moving around unnecessarily and then causing uneven stitching. So it gently presses your cloth down so that all the components underneath can move on it smoothly, right? And as a beginner, you don't want to forget lowering your presser foot before sewing, because if you don't do it, your machine may appear to sew, but irony, there is nothing it is sewing, right? And then we have the presser foot lifter. Behind the needle area is the presser foot lifter. Are you seeing it? Now this lever raises and lowers the presser foot. You see it when I raise it, you see it when I put it down. Are you seeing it? Right? So whenever you want to sew, you raise it, you place your fabric, then you lower it before sewing. You raise it, you remove your fabric, after sewing. You use gentle movement. So don't force, deliver. Your machine already automatically was created to move smoothly and not with force, to sew easily and the likes. Now we continue. You see under the presser foot is what we have the throat plate, sometimes called the needle plate, and this supports your fabric while sewing. When you look at it closely, you see engraved lines on the surface. You see 1 inch, you see 3/4, you see half inch, right? These are seam guides. They help you sew seam allowance, straight seam allowance. So the way it works is you go to maybe a tailor store and then ask them, there's this particular magnet that is used. You just put it on your fabric, right? So whenever, or you can even use a magnet. If you have a very big magnet that can fit into it, you just put it on it. You want to try it. Once you put your magnet on it, it sticks. So for whatever seam allowance you want to sew, you just put it there, and then it gives you that seam from the beginning of where you want to sew it to the end of where you want it to get to. We move on to what we call the feed dogs, right? But I want you to watch closely what happens. You see the way I am turning the hand wheel, right? You see those small metal thing that looks like teeth, zigzag teeth. You see them moving up and down. These are what we call the feed dogs. And what do? Their job is to move every and any cloth forward after every stitch. Now they work together with the presser foot. Remember we said the presser foot is the one that holds the fabric down. Now, while the feed dogs are doing their work, the presser foot is the one holding them down. So the feed dog is the one gently moving, the fabric forward, right? So that's why as beginners, when you're sewing, they tell you don't pull your fabric. You don't pull it, right? Because already that is the job of the feed dog. So the feed dog gives the fabric to the presser foot. It does it. So you're not to drag it. You're not to pull it, because you could bend your needle, you could break your needle, you can even produce uneven stitches, right? So you just want to guide your fabric gently. You want to guide it gently and allow the feed dog to do its job. Okay, now we've learned everything about the upper part of the machine, except for some, I think about two or three. Let's quickly move to the down part, right? That's underneath the throat plate. Remember our throat plate. So let's look underneath it. We have our bobbin. You see the big spool spin I showed you at the top of the machine. Now, this one here is the small one. You call it small spool, and it's called a bobbin, generally called a bobbin, right? The bobbin holds the lower thread, right? The bobbin holds the lower thread. One thread comes from the top of the machine, the second thread comes from the bottom of the machine. Let me use that word, or from the bobbin. Now the two of them meet and lock together to form a stitch. If your bobbin runs out of thread, your machine will stop giving you proper stitch. You get, you just be hearing, but when you take it out, there is no stitching done, right? So it's always good to check your bobbin. And then again, even when your bobbin is done, like there's no thread in it again, when you are sewing, if you are really experienced and you understand your machine, there's this particular sound it gives or makes or does that lets you know that it looks like the thread underneath is, finished. And then we have the bobbin case. The bobbin case is where the bobbin sits inside. The bobbin case holds the bobbin securely and control how smoothly the lower thread is released during sewing. If you insert your bobbin case correctly, you may experience tangled thread if you don't insert it correctly. Or you even experience, a pull of thread underneath your fabric. Never force your bobbin into the machine. Insert it correctly according to your machine instructions. Just the same way your tension guide, your tension, the extension knob is very important up. Same way your bobbin. You don't want to fix your bobbin incorrectly. You don't want to thread the small spool in the bobbin, incorrectly, or put it inside the bobbin incorrectly. And you don't want to put the small spool inside the bobbin case incorrectly too, right? Now we move on to the slide plate. The slide plate is what protects the bobbin area from dust, from Orishirishisha. It shall protects it. So whenever you need to replace the bobbin or clean the hook area, simply slide this plate open, and then you do what you want to do, and then you close it. You want to always make sure this place is clean, because if you don't clean it, or at least use your mouth to blow out the dirt frequently, dirt can build up over time, and then this may actually affect your machine's performance. So the next on our list now is the handrail. Are you saying this? This is the handrail, right? What does it do? It allows you to move your needle manually, right? See, when I turn it now, look at what it's doing. You see how the needle is rising and falling, right? See how it's rising and falling, right? So that's what the hand wheel does. It gives you complete control. Whenever you want to position the needle before sewing, you want to turn corners, maybe you are sewing a neckline, or you want to remove your fabric safely. The hand needle gives you that. And then even when you are using you are pedaling on the machine, the handle is the one that lets you know that your sewing is going on correctly in the right way. So when you are pedaling your motor, or you're pedaling your machine, be it industrial or even manual, your hand wheel is supposed to, be turning towards you. It's supposed to be coming, let me use the word clockwise, not anti-clockwise. So it's supposed to be turning towards you, not turning behind you. Do you understand? That's facing your machine. The handle should be turning towards you, not turning behind you. And then we have the reverse lever. What does this reverse lever do? We don't actually use it to sew an entire garment, right? But what we use it to do is to secure the beginning and the end of a seam. We call it back stitching. So when you want to back stitch, this is what you do. When you start sewing, you want to sew first, you want to back stitch so that you lock that stitch in place, and then you continue sewing, and then when you are done, you back stitch it again so that your stitches do not come undone during wear, or maybe when it's being washed, right? Then we have the stitch length regulator. This controls the length of your stitch Every machine has it. So if you want your stitch to be short, or depending on the fabric you are sewing, you want your stitch to be short, this is what controls it from number 1 to number 2, 3, 4, 5. I basically use a 3.5. That's the standard for what I use. A 3.5, right? That's for what I use. And then I use a 5 for gathers, right? So that's what your stitch length regulator does. So this is your bobbin winder. This is what views the thread into the small spool pin in the bobbin, right? And as you can see from the video, it has places there attached to the machine, right? And it has its own spool spin too. It has its own tension disc. It has its own spring check. It has its own spool spin. It also has its own tension knob, right? So what this does is just to help you reel your thread into the small spool spin that goes into the bobbin, right? So now we move on to the machine motor. The machine motor is under the sewing machine table, and it provides the machine the power that drives the sewing machine. It has a belt that allows it send power or send energy to all parts of the machine so that they work together. Without your motor, your machine cannot sew automatically. It could possible, it cannot, especially for an industrial machine, right? It cannot. Then we have our foot pedal. This is the foot pedal. Think of it as the accelerator of your machine. When you in the first video I said, when you just step on your motor, which is why I recommend the manual machine for beginners, you just be hearing vroom. Exactly. So think of it as the accelerator of your machine. The more pressure you put on this foot pedal, the faster your machine sew. And that's why I don't recommend it for beginner, right? But as a beginner, if this is what your budget allows you to, don't focus on the speed, focus on control. So it means that you step on your foot pedal gently. Don't focus on speed, focus on control, because that way you build your confidence. And then as you become more good, you become more confident with running your machine, pedaling your machine, then the speed will naturally come to you. So we have come to the end of our lesson 3, module 1, right? But then before we call it a day, I need you to know these few things, right? Always switch off your machine before changing the needle. For those of us using an industrial machine, right? Always switch it off before changing the needle. Don't force your machine to do anything. If something doesn't feel right, stop, check the problem, and then continue. Right, so that's a wrap. We've learned a lot today. We've learned about the spool pin, we've learned about thread guide, tension disc, tension knob, check spring, take up lever, needle bar, needle clamp, needle pressure foot lifter. We've learned about our throat plate, our bobbin, feed dogs, bobbin case. We've learned about our hand wheel, our reverse lever, our stitch length regulator, our foot. That's the whole lot of information. So don't worry if you don't remember every part right immediately. All you need to do is rewatch this lesson as many times as you need to. Pause the video, point to each part on your own machine, right? The more familiar these names become, the easier your sewing journey will be. And then for those of us using manual machine, I'm going to be adding a transparent background PNG of a butterfly manual blackhead machine that has names of the machine parts. So you just want to use it to just connect, using the video to connect on your own machine the names and where they are on your manual machine. So our homework for today is, before our next lesson, I need you to spend 15 minutes with your sewing machine, be it industrial or manual. Don't pedal, don't switch on yet. Just identify every part we've discussed. For those of us using manual, using the PNG image, try as much as possible to identify those parts on your own machine. Then write down each of them in a notebook. Point to it as you say out the name. Repetition is gain, right? So when you repeat something, it sticks to you. So doing this will help you remember much more quickly everything we've learned today. So this is as promised for the domestic manual machine. Now you want to zoom it in, check in those names, compare it, with what we've discussed or talked about in this video. You want to label your own manual machine to if it is manual machine you are using, right? It's just basically the same thing. Even where to wound your bobbin or thread, it's also here in this diagram. So you want to thoroughly check everything, just zoom in proper and check everything, connect everything, and know your own machine to be a manual. So we have come to the end of our lesson 3, module 1, right? But then before we call it a day, I need you to know these few things, right? Always switch off your machine before changing the needle. For those of us using an industrial machine, right? Always switch it off before changing the needle. Don't force your machine to do anything. If something doesn't feel right, stop, check the problem, and then continue. Right, so that's a wrap. We've learned a lot today. We've learned about the spool pin, we've learned about thread guide, tension disc, tension knob, check spring, take up lever, needle bar, needle clamp, needle pressure foot lifter. We've learned about our throat plate, our bobbin, feed dogs, bobbin case. We've learned about our hand wheel, our reverse lever, our stitch length regulator, our foot. That's the whole lot of information. So don't worry if you don't remember every part right immediately. All you need to do is rewatch this lesson as many times as you need to. Pause the video, point to each part on your own machine, right? The more familiar these names become, the easier your sewing journey will be. And then for those of us using manual machine, I'm going to be adding a transparent background PNG of a butterfly manual blackhead machine that has names of the machine parts. So you just want to use it to just connect, using the video to connect on your own machine the names and where they are on your manual machine. So our homework for today is, before our next lesson, I need you to spend 15 minutes with your sewing machine, be it industrial or manual. Don't pedal, don't switch on yet. Just identify every part we've discussed. For those of us using manual, using the PNG image, try as much as possible to identify those parts on your own machine, then write down each of them in a notebook. Point to it as you say out the name. Repetition is gain, right? So when you repeat something, it sticks to you. So doing this will help you remember much more, quickly everything we've learned today. So now we've come to the end of the class for today properly. Thank you for learning with me today. I hope this lesson has helped you become more familiar with your industrial and also manual sewing machine. In our next lesson, we'll explore the essential sewing tools every beginner should own, how to choose quality tools, and how to care for them so that they last for years. So if you found this lesson helpful, please like the video, subscribe to ÀṣọEl-emet Academy, and share this lesson with someone who wants to learn sewing. Remember, confidence in sewing doesn't come from rushing it. It comes from understanding the basics and practicing them consistently. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in lesson 4. Bye.